Hey guys, today we're in the book of 2 Kings chapter 17. Well, today we see the end of the kingdom of Israel. We start out in chapter 17 with a new king and the last king of Israel, of the north. His name is Hoshea. He began to reign over Israel, and he reigned for 9 years. And so a lot happened in that time. But notice it says he did what was evil in the sight of his Lord, yet not as the kings of Israel before him. So he was a bad king, but he wasn't as bad as some of the other kings of the north. But while he was king, the king of Assyria came up against him, Shalmaneser, and Hoshea became a vassal and paid him tribute. Much like the king before him, Menahem, he saw Assyria coming in, he saw the power, and he said, hey, how about we pay you and we'll be your vassal state. Basically, you're the king, we'll do what you say, but you'll leave me on the throne so I have a little bit authority. And the king of Syria really doesn't care because he's still getting what he wants, right? He's getting power, money, and land. That's exactly what he wants in order to take over the world. And so this works for a while, but through the years, they said they started to say, you know what, we don't want to pay you anymore. And so the king of Assyria says, fine, well, I'll show you. And it tells him that he shut him up, bound him in prison, and then Assyria comes in to invade Samaria, or Israel, the northern kingdom. And for 3 years, Assyria is munching like Pac-Man, all the way down on on Israel, and they captured Samaria, Israel, and they carried the Israelites away to Assyria. Assyria, we talked a little bit about this a couple days ago. Their practice was that when they took over a nation, they would take those people and they would repopulate somewhere else. Right? If you left everybody there, they would create an uprising. And so their soldiers would take them and they would mix all of these Jews, all of Israel, across basically the Middle East in small groups. And so they could never come back together to lead a mutiny or to lead a war against Assyria. And so Assyria did that. So as they went into Babylon, we see they brought Babylonians, they brought Egyptians, they brought this and this. And basically they mixed up the whole world. So they mixed up religion, mixed up languages, cultures, eating, education, everybody just kind of got mixed in. A huge melting pot of the world is what Assyria did in this time. As you can see on your chart, right, if you look on the far right side, right here at this bottom, Israel is no longer. Right, so Assyria has taken over, and so in 721 BC, that's just a date, 721 BC is when Israel, the northern kingdom, stopped to exist. So now we only have the southern kingdom, Judah, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. And so Israel has been taken over. They're slaves. Many of them have been killed, but the rest of them have been mixed up. And when you read this, you think, wow, that's so harsh of God, right? Why would God, this is his chosen people. This is the people who he made a promise with all the way back in Genesis chapter 12 as he brought them to the promised land with Joshua. This is your land. This is where you'll be blessed. Moses standing on Mount Nebo looking at the promised land. All of that is gone. It's all gone. It's all taken away. And when you read this, you might think, wow, why would God do that? Well, God knows that we would ask those questions. And so he reminds us in the next verses why he did this. So starting in verse 7, kind of through verse 18, we get 5 reasons, okay? 5 reasons why God did this. Verse 7, number 1, this occurred because the people of Israel sinned against the Lord. They've sinned against the Lord who brought them up out of the land of Egypt from the hand of Pharaoh. Number 1, Israel forgot the God of their redemption. God saved them for a blessing and a better future, but they forgot God. They didn't care about God, so God allowed Israel to be taken away. Number 2, verse 8, they walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord drove out. They conformed to the world, right? Remember, as they were coming into the promised land, God said, hey, kick out all these nations because you will be different. You will be the light on the hill. You will have everybody come to you and conform to you, but Israel didn't do that. They conformed to everybody else. They were not the light on the hill. They were the shadow. They were like what they saw in the world. So, number 1, they forgot the God of their redemption. 2, they conformed to the world. Number 3, they secretly and openly built for themselves high places. They secretly and openly worshiped idols. Exactly what God told them right before they even came into the promised land. God took them to Mount Sinai with Moses and said, there shall be no other gods before you. Israel never kept to that. Verse 13, the 4th thing, the Lord warned Israel and Judah by every prophet and every seer, but verse 14, they would not listen. Over and over and over again, they rejected the warnings of God. God said, you better be careful or I'm coming to get you. And they said, we don't believe you. They rejected God over and over and over again. That's number 4. Number 5, they abandoned all the commandments of the Lord their God, made for themselves metal images of 2 calves. They forsaken God. They forsook God, right? God said, here's what I want you to do. And they said, we don't care. And they just totally forsook him, didn't even care about him. And so over and over and over again, in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, after prophets after prophets after prophets, they never got the point. And so God finally said, fine, you want it your way, have it your way. And he allowed Assyria to come in and to wipe them out. Verse 18, therefore, because they did all of that, the Lord was very angry and removed them out of his sight. None was left but the tribe of Judah only. Judah and Benjamin, right? The very small, round Jerusalem, that was the only part of Israel that was left. The rest of them were killed or spread all across the world. But Judah did not keep the commandments of the Lord, but they walked in the customs of Israel. Judah wasn't perfect. They sinned all the time, but they kept the commandments of the Lord a little bit. They kept walking in the right way. They weren't walking directly toward God, but they were walking kind of towards God, right? They were much better than Israel. They have not completely forgotten God. And that's why God allowed Judah to stay. Verse 23, Israel was exiled from their own land to Assyria until that day. And so Israel's gone. The only part now is Judah, a little small kingdom, the very southern part of the promised land. But now we get to see a little bit of understanding, a little bit of New Testament understanding. The king of Assyria, verse 24, brought people from Babylon, from Kutah, from Hama, some Seraphim, and placed inside the cities of Samaria inside the people of Israel. They did not fear the Lord, and because they did not fear the Lord, God sent lions and kept eating everybody, right? And so some of the priests, some of the advisors of Assyria comes and says, hey, you keep bringing all these people into this land of Israel, they're all getting killed. And it's because they don't know the God of Israel. And so the king says, well, bring one priest, we don't know his name, one priest who was in Israel, bring him back that he may teach all of the new people so that they won't keep getting wiped out. Here's the problem. The priests of Israel were terrible. They weren't godly. They didn't follow God. They knew of God, but they worshiped other gods. So he was a corrupt priest, right? So they bring in this priest that kind of knows Yahweh, but knows all the other gods as well, right? And so he kind of teaches about God, but teaches about other things as well. He's not a good priest. He's not a godly priest. He's a corrupt, kind of just junky priest, right? And so what happens as this land of Israel that we are starting to call Samaria, and in the New Testament we will call Samaria, we're creating this group of people who are from all over the world, right? But they're learning a little bit of Jewish and a little bit of something else. And they're interweaving Jewish religion, God religion, Yahweh religion with other religions. They're mixing a little bit of Jewish blood with blood of Egyptians and Babylonians and Kuths and Savonians and all of these other countries. And Samaria becomes this place of half-breeds. These people that intermarry, and not only do they intermarry nationally, but racially, but religiously, culturally, and now they're taking all of these things, a little bit of Yahweh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and over hundreds of years, when Jesus steps on the scene in Samaria, all of the Jews hate Samaria because why? They're half-breeds. They're not true Jews. They don't worship Yahweh alone, and they don't worship, they don't follow the Torah, the Old Testament alone. They added a bunch of other stuff. So they're not pure Yahweh worshipers. And so the Jews hate the Samaritans because they're not good enough, and the Samaritans hate the Jews because they say they're not good enough, right? So it creates this dynamic. And that's what's so important when we turn the pages to John chapter 4 and Jesus goes through Samaria and says he had to go, and he sits down with a Samaritan woman at a well, and he says, I'm the Messiah, and I can bring you salvation. It changes the world. It truly changes the world. And so I hope you see in all of this, as we're reading, that they feared the Lord, but they feared other gods. They did this, they did that. And it even says in verse 41, they feared the Lord, and they also served carved images. Their children did likewise, their children's children, as their fathers did, even to this day. And even today, you go through Samaria, you see Jews, Muslims, you see Gentiles, you see lots of religions there. And so it's so important that Jews believe God came for their salvation and their salvation only. But Jesus in John chapter 4 says we must go to Samaria. I have a divine appointment. And he sits down with a woman who then goes and tells a village, and he sits down with the village and he brings salvation to these messed up half-breed people. That salvation is for all people who believe. This chapter is directly related to John chapter 4. Hope that makes a little bit more sense. Starts to paint the picture. Israel is now gone, and now Judah is the only group of people left that keeps the promise of God, that keeps the promise of Abraham, that keeps the promise of David, and now what will happen to them? We'll see you tomorrow in chapter 18. God bless.